What did your ancestors actually do with the dark? Not the romantic version, the real version. Before electric light, before candles were cheap, before cities had street lamps, the night was roughly 12 hours of complete darkness every single day, for 300,000 years. Your ancestors were not sleeping through all of it, they were doing something else in the middle. Something that produced a specific hormonal state that every major religion independently discovered and built practice around. Something that most people alive today have never experienced, and something we accidentally eliminated in about one generation. Here is what it was. 3 things to cover: how the original human night actually worked, what your ancestors were doing in the hours between first sleep and second sleep, and what a single invention did to your sleep architecture that medicine is still catching up to. Let's start before fire, because that is where this gets interesting. Before controlled fire, the human day ended at sunset. When the light went, you stopped moving, because moving at night meant being eaten. Your eyes are genuinely bad in the dark compared to the animals that hunted you. For most of human prehistory, darkness was not peaceful. It was the thing that killed you if you stepped into it. Most people think fire just made the night safer. That is true, but it massively undersells what fire actually changed. The earliest solid evidence of controlled fire comes from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, roughly 1 million years ago. And fire did not just protect your ancestors, it created something that had never existed before in human history. Usable hours. 2 to 4 extra hours every single night, inside a ring of flame roughly 30 feet across. Inside that ring, predators would not come. Outside it, the night still wanted to kill you. But inside it, something interesting started happening. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent 40 years studying the Juhwansi Bushmen of the Kalahari, one of the last groups on Earth still living close to the original human pattern. During the day, roughly 80% of conversations were practical. Who's hunting where? Which plants are ready? Work. But at night, around the fire, 81% were stories, myths, jokes, accounts of people in distant places. The entire character of human language shifted the moment the sun went down. Her conclusion was not subtle. The campfire, she argued, was where human culture was born. Not in cities, not in temples. Around a fire, in the dark, telling each other things that were not immediately useful. That is literally where you became human. Now, fire gave your ancestors time, and in that time, the mind did something it could not do during the day. But that is only part of what the night gave them. Because while they sat around that fire, something was happening inside their bodies that most people alive today have never experienced. And once you understand what it was, the 2 a.m. wake-up starts to make a lot more sense. In 2015, researchers at UCLA collected over 1,000 days of sleep data from 3 hunter-gatherer groups living without electricity, without screens, without alarm clocks: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, the Chimane of Bolivia. The assumption going in was that people without artificial light would sleep more. That assumption was wrong. These groups slept an average of 6.4 hours a night. Not 8, 6.4. And here's the detail that tends to stop people. None of the 3 languages these groups speak has a word for insomnia. Not because insomnia was common, but because it almost never happened. Their circadian rhythms were measurably stronger than modern populations, more consistent, more anchored to natural light cycles. The difference is not how much they slept, it is the quality of the darkness they slept inside. And what happened inside that darkness is the part historians almost missed entirely. Here is the assumption most people never think to question. We assume one continuous block of 7 or 8 hours is just how humans sleep. It feels natural. It never occurs to anyone to push on it. But it is a very recent invention, and the evidence has been sitting in historical records for centuries. Historian R.J. Urkich spent 16 years in archives and found over 2,000 references to the same thing across a dozen languages, going back to ancient Greece. Julius Caesar's military writings mention it. Homer's Odyssey contains it. Translators had been quietly adjusting the language for generations because the phrase these sources kept using did not match anything they recognized. First sleep and second sleep. Before the industrial age, people didn't sleep in one block. They went to bed shortly after dark, slept for roughly 4 hours, woke up, stayed awake for 1 to 2 hours, then slept again until dawn. This was not insomnia. It was the standard human sleep pattern, so ordinary that when a 9-year-old girl named Jane Routh mentioned in an English court deposition in 1697 that her mother had gone out after her first sleep, nobody in the room needed it explained. It was as natural as saying she went out after lunch.
Now, what were people actually doing during that middle window? The physician Laurent Joubert, writing in the 1500s, recommended it for conception, noting couples have more enjoyment and do it better. People visited neighbors, interpreted fresh dreams, wrote. A doctor's manual from the same era prescribed the window for study and reflection, because the mind at this hour was calm in a way it was at no other point in the day. They were onto something, and in 1992, a psychiatrist named Thomas Ware at the National Institute of Mental Health ran the experiment that explained exactly what they had noticed. Ware put volunteers into an environment of 14 hours of darkness every night for 1 month. By the 4th week, something consistent had emerged. Every participant settled into the same pattern: 2 sleep blocks, 3 to 5 hours each, with a quiet window of 1 to 2 hours between them. Nobody told them to. Their bodies just did it, as if something had been waiting under the surface the entire time. Ware measured hormone levels during that wakeful window and found something unexpected. His subjects were not in a normal waking state. Their brains were flooded with prolactin, the same hormone associated with deep meditation and the period following orgasm. Fully conscious, not groggy or anxious, just unusually, measurably calm. That was not a gap in sleep. That was its own distinct state of consciousness. And here is where it gets genuinely strange. Every major contemplative tradition on Earth independently found this same window. Christian monks called it vigils, and the rule of Saint Benedict formally built the night structure around waking at this hour, because generations of monks noticed the mind here was different. Islamic tradition calls it tahajjud, the voluntary night prayer in the last third of the night, considered the most spiritually potent prayer a Muslim can offer, with the Quran specifically referencing it. Zen Buddhist monks have kept formal midnight practice for over 1,000 years. Jewish scholars called these the hours of deepest study. 4 traditions, 4 continents, no contact between them, all arriving at the same window. They did not know about prolactin. They just noticed something was there, and they protected it. So that is what the night gave your ancestors. Now here is what happened to it. The answer is almost embarrassingly simple. Light. Cities began installing street lamps in the 1600s. Paris was among the first, under Louis XIV. London followed. Cheaper candles came next, then gas lamps, and then in 1879, Thomas Edison commercialized the electric light bulb. Within a generation, the night as humans had known it for 300,000 years was gone. The word curfew, incidentally, comes from the French couvre-feu, cover fire. Medieval towns rang a bell at night to signal everyone to extinguish their flames, because darkness was the expected state of night, and being outside in it without a lantern was illegal in most European cities. We abolished all of that and called it progress. Here is what that actually costs you. The blue light from your phone, your television, your LED lamp sits between 460 and 500 nanometers, precisely the frequency that activates the melanopsin receptors in your retina, the cells that tell your brain's circadian clock it is daytime. Your body cannot tell that signal apart from sunlight. When blue light hits your retina at 11 at night, melatonin production does not slow, it stops. The natural break between first and second sleep gets squeezed out of existence, and the downstream effects are not subtle. After just 1 week of sleeping 5 to 6 hours, testosterone in men drops substantially, growth hormone decreases, and cortisol drops 6 times slower than in fully rested people. You go to bed elevated on the stress hormone and wake up still carrying it. Chronic sleep disruption is linked to insulin resistance, cardiovascular disease, depression, and cognitive decline. Not correlated, linked. This is not about feeling tired. It is about running a biological system outside its design parameters every single night and wondering why things feel off. And here's the thing. The fix is surprisingly simple in principle. People who camp for just 7 days with no artificial light have their melatonin onset reset by nearly 2 hours, bodies producing melatonin at sunset instead of hours after it. 300,000 years of programming reasserts itself in a week because it never left. So, when you wake at 2 in the morning, heart slightly up, reaching for your phone, here's what's actually happening. Your body opened the window. The prolactin is rising. The mind is moving toward that quiet meditative state that Ware measured and monks built entire lifetimes around. The moment you look at a screen, blue light hits your retina and the window closes. And in the morning, you tell someone you have insomnia. You do not have insomnia. You have a sleep architecture that is 300,000 years old, running inside a world that has existed about 150. Those two things do not fit yet, and nobody is telling you that. Now you know.